Hey folks, it's Ray with Taste Radio. Right now, I am honored to be sitting down with Quentin Vennie, who is the founder of Equitea, and Greg Lowe II, the founder of 100 Coconuts. Gentlemen, great to see you.
Yes, sir. Good to
Great to
see
see you.
you.
Great to see you, Ray. Thank you for having us.
It's great to see you. It's been about a year, almost 2 years now. The last time we sat down, we were in New York City at your office. It was right around the time of the Summer Fancy Food Show out there, and you don't look like you aged a day, which is pretty impressive.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I feel like, when you got a son running around and he's, 6-year-old, they age you pretty quickly. If you could see up close, I got some grays all in here. So.
I can't see a single one. Yeah. And Quentin, you as always are looking fresh. I appreciate the fact that you have done so much to help put these episodes together with us, and I really appreciate it. As our audience knows, the Black Founders Club is a limited series that we are highlighting here on Taste Radio. Quentin, we produced and published our first episode last year, and just as a refresher to folks, just talk about the focus and what we're trying to do here with the series.
Yeah, no, thank you. Again, we're looking to really highlight the challenges, the experiences, but also the victories, right, associated with being Black founders in the CPG space, right? Our experiences tend to be a bit unique, and I think that BevNet and Taste Radio provides an incredible resource platform for information sharing, right? I think a shared story can really make a significant impact. And I think it's important as we continue to navigate this space to really highlight, a lot of the opportunities that we found, a lot of the challenges that we experience, but also a lot of the victories that we have, right, in the face of all of it, and how we continue to grow and thrive within the food and beverage CPG landscape.
The three of us had an opportunity to sit down a couple weeks ago, and one of the things we were chatting about was this notion of being both an entrepreneur in CPG and also a Black founder, and sort of the nuances of being both.
As a starting point, right? We're constantly in this interesting juxtaposition between being identified publicly as a Black-owned company and being identified publicly as a company, right? And I think that's a really unique space for us to exist in because, I've had multiple conversations with other founders, and a lot of what we've been pushing and fighting for is this recognition that though we are Black, we are building incredible companies. And I think a lot of times there's a perception attached to Black-owned brands that were only created for Black people, right? And when you look at other brands, regardless of, the ethnicity and nationality or history of its founder, these brands are looked at and perceived as being for everyone, right? And so we're constantly in this space of having to operate with the recognition and pride of being Black, right? I often say if I could go back and do it again, I'd come back Black. So there's a pride attached to our history, our ethnicity, and who we are, right, as Black people. But there's also this other side of like, at what point do we no longer become classified as just Black businesses and become classified as good businesses? And I think, that was one of the foundational ideologies behind naming the company Equitea, right? It wasn't just merely about creating equitable access to better for you products, primarily tea, we're a tea company, but it was really about like breaking down these barriers of inequity, so that we can all enjoy the benefits and the fruits of our labor.
Yep, that's cool, man. I mean, and I think you hit it on the head. Being a African American entrepreneur and have running a Black business, you have your pros and your cons, right? I mean, just with anything in life. But as you know, being an African American in this space, which is, I wouldn't even say 1%, or maybe point something. You come up against some trials and tribulations that maybe our counterparts wouldn't come up against. And that's just the fact of the matter. That happens with women, minorities, etc. And we need to just be real about it instead of acting like it's not there. But I do think that there's the positives of running a black business, and those are when you launch, people have so much enthusiasm about where you're going to go because it's never been done before, right? Or they haven't seen much of it. So even with 100 coconuts, coming out first black owned coconut water, and I took pride in that, even though I didn't know it at the time, and the media came at it. But I took pride in that because, let's break barriers in everything we do. There are our ancestors, the people who came before us, mentors who weren't given the same opportunities that we were given, and they're like, man, I wish I was able to do that. So I think having that tag gives a certain pride to the business. It makes people feel good when they're walking into the store and they're purchasing. They're like, yeah, and it's also black owned. I see it on social media all the time.
There is definitely a pride in having that ownership and also seeing ourselves represented on those shelves. I mean, I can't name how many times I've gone to a grocery store and I never saw myself represented. I never saw my culture represented. I never saw the ingredients that are native to the African diaspora, right, celebrated and represented.
Yep.
And I think there's something to be proud about that, and not shy away from the fact that we are black, right?
Mm-hmm.
The challenge again is, we are growing and scaling and building incredible businesses, and we just happen to be black.
That's exactly, you hit it right on the head, Quentin. Hit it right on the head, Q.
Yeah. Although, in this current political environment, and it seems like the federal government's loath for the term DEI, um, I wonder if it's made it more difficult to talk about, being a black owned business in any context.
Everything has its cycle, and I see what Quentin. Yeah, I mean, we both were starting it the same way, right? I mean, look, we went through this before, and black tiles came about. Revolution is never televised, and the thing is that when you're in a space that we're in where people are split and they're trying to take away the division, even though replacing DEI, and that's dividing even more. I think what you'll start to see is people leaning in a little bit more. I think you'll start because you got to realize, half of America, or a little bit more than half of America, is about DEI, and you have companies that are standing up to say we're keeping our program. So, for women, for minorities, for everyone that is included in DEI, I think we should look at it as this is just a break away from the formal way of saying it, and people are just going to do it, which is naturally what you want anyway. All right, you want people to give opportunities for who they are, and I wish we could continue to have DEI as a forefront, because I think we have so much more to do before we can just say it's over. Let's start treating everybody equal and see where we get. But hey, it's 4 years, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are more people who want it than people who don't, right? And we're starting to see it. I think the challenge that I'm seeing, is that it's creating division within community, right? And those are things that, get highlighted during moments like this. But this is nothing new, right? Like, we've built and have established ourselves, and then things have gotten destroyed, right? Look at Black Wall Street, right? Like, that's just one example of how we've built and it's been destroyed and dismantled, and yet we continue to build, right? And we continue to build those bridges, to build those allies, and continue to thrive, right? And so, as long as the world is spinning, we'll continue to push the envelope. And in context of that, Greg, I hope I'm not jumping out the window on this one, but you mentioned your retail partners, two of which have publicly come out against continuing the DEI programs. how has that impacted your business, and or do you see it impacting your business?
Well, I gotta be frank and say, I've seen some of these companies outwardly say we are getting rid of DEI, but like I said, they're still giving us opportunities. We're still expanding. The Walmarts and Targets are still expanding our brand. And I think and not everyone, obviously, but I think people are more so, instead of putting it through a DEI program, you're just going through the regular program that everyone else goes through, and that way you get the exposure that everyone else gets, right? So I haven't seen any issues even with the partners that have denounced DEI, but I've actually seen growth, which I'm proud of, because I think the people that are in place, and that's ultimately what's needed. It's the people that are in place in the decision making positions to make decisions that reflect the culture in the world. It's not about, hey, we have to make this more black, or we have to bring more women. That's what the world is. So if Target wants to sell to more women, they're going to have female led products on the shelves. If Target is going to sell to more African Americans, which is a huge part of their revenue generation base, if they have 15% of their sales coming from the African American crowd, they're going to have to put African American brands on on the shelf. So we're never going back to that. What we the full white Caucasian toy world. Remember that? Where all the toys were Caucasian. We're not going back to that. There's going to have to be a representation, because little black girls are buying dolls, and also little white girls and Indian girls. So we'll see it all.
100%. No, I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because there is a nuance, and there's like these, very loud conversations within our community of like what that means for us as founders, but then also what does that mean for consumers? And, I think a lot of it has yet to be determined because, as you mentioned, which I think is a really interesting point, it's something to point out that though these companies have publicly denounced these, DEI initiatives, you as a Black founder have also seen continuous growth. And I think that's something that most people wouldn't have anticipated, because I think the perception is by getting rid of these DEI initiatives or these programs, it's then eliminating, Black founders and businesses from being a part of the conversation or having a seat at the table. And some would argue that that's not what's happening, and you have other sides that would argue the opposite. So I'm grateful that you shared and offered that perspective.
Absolutely. And the other part of this, I think, is if, as Greg pointed out, there's a whole part of the population that is looking for and looking to support Black-owned brands, well, the funding has to be there as well to support these brands. And I think that's something we've talked about ad nauseum for every CPG company out there. And it was something we talked about in the last episode of the Black Founders Club. But Quentin, I'm sensing that the path has gotten even more challenging over the past 6 months or so. Has it?
Yeah, I mean the landscape in primarily in food and beverage, has significantly shifted. The access to capital has slowed up even more than it was before, which, it's like, there was an episode of Martin. He said, if you move any slower, you'll be moving backwards, right? And it's like, it seems like if we move any slower, then we're moving in the opposite direction. And that's not just, from my experience. I think every Black founded CPG brand, food and beverage primarily, founder that I've spoken to has had these challenges. I mean, when you look at the numbers, and it already states that we're receiving less than 1% of venture capital funds, and then you look at the goalposts constantly moving and shifting, it definitely provides some room for concern, and creates a lot of challenge in having the ability to not only start good, founded businesses, but also grow and scale them. And we're having to be very diligent and creative with how we're funding and how we're looking at the economic landscape in order for us to be able to continue to thrive and grow.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we have to look outside of America. And that's something that I had to do. That's something that a lot of people are doing. We went as far as the Middle East. We're in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and Dubai. London. You look outside and you see that people want to be a part of the American market. And they want to take place in it because it's one of the most thriving and robust markets in the world. So, as you're building a business as a Black founder, the world doesn't look at it as a Black founder. They look at it as an opportunity to get into the American market if you have a good product. So, what I would say is that's not easy for everyone. I mean, it dried up for us as well in America. The percentage of investment in Black businesses overall is below 1%, as far as venture capital is concerned. And we're not, I would never say we're not playing the black card when you say that. These are data points. And people need to understand that those data points mean something. There's an innate bias that goes around with Black businesses that they either can't scale because what's going to happen is you're going to get your initial, or you're going to make it so far off bootstrapping and fighting and clawing tails that the next round is going to be damn near impossible for you, or you're going to come up against the position where this company may not exit because there haven't been but a handful of Black companies that have exited. So you come up against that, and sometimes it's race driven, but it's also even beyond race because it could be a VC fund that has LPs that they have to answer to. And what happens is they're looking for companies that they know in the next 5 to 10 years they're going to be able to exit. And if the percentage of African American Black businesses aren't selling at the rate that our counterparts are getting acquisitions or exits, then they feel like they have a fiduciary duty not to invest in these businesses, which sucks, right? So I think going forward into 2025, what we'll start to see is people basing investments off of one, equity and inclusion. I think that's going to be a big thing because now that you have a crypto and the stock market doing what it's doing, obviously with this thing with DeepSeek just a few days ago, that took it down. But now that you see people really get into that brand scope, you're going to start seeing investors take advantage of DEI because, like we said, when you take it away, it's only going to amplify the message. So you're going to have people actively looking for Black owned brands. I'm only buying Black. For instance, my mother, love her to death. She called me. She said, "Don't go to Target again." And I said, "Mom, what do you mean? I got to go to Target. We're not going to Target anymore." And, so I get that. But when she's not going to Target, she's going to be looking outside to companies that are actually including her as a person and a voice. And if we know anything, African American women are one of the top spenders in all of the economy. So, you know, there's a two-sided story here. We can talk about all the bad things, we can talk about all the good things, but what we won't do is we won't quit. There's going to continuously be new companies coming about.
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke that, man, because you really hit the nail on the head, and I think it's important as Black founders, as founders in general, right? But primarily as Black founders, considering, the primary reason why we haven't seen a lot of Black founded companies exit is because the data points that most Black founded companies don't have access to capital, and you need that level of capital in order to be able to grow and scale. I mean, not everybody, has been able to do what, Richie Lou Dennis has done, right? And
Yeah,
when you have individuals like him who then takes, a portion of what he made from that acquisition and invest it back into the community, now you're starting to see Black founded, primarily Black women founded beauty brands having the opportunity to exit and having the opportunity to get this access to capital to grow and scale. We haven't seen it in food and beverage, right? And I think
yeah,
what you're doing, is really speaking about and tapping into something you know, that's an opportunity that expands beyond the domestic reach. Yes, people are looking to get into the American market, but I think America needs to be looking into getting into other markets as well, right?
correct.
And
Yeah,
being able to tap into those economic resources and those brick and mortar resources expands, our customer base, expands our impact right? And then gives us the opportunities that, that haven't necessarily been allotted in this country. So I think what you've done and what you're speaking about is brilliance in action. So congratulations.
I appreciate it. Thank you, man. I mean, we have to continue to open up doors. That's the biggest thing, right? And we have a duty and it's crazy. And I always wonder. I say, what would it be like to build a business and not have a duty, right? As a person, but as a African American founder, I have a duty outside of beverage. I have a duty to be um, there's a certain saying in our culture, right? That I won't say on this podcast, but there's a certain type of business that it was used to be known that African Americans operated in, and this is a professionalized business with a board, with cap table valuations. This is very buttoned up, and I think in order for us to continue to showcase that we can be there, we have to continue to educate ourselves, go back for continued learning if we can, get business acumen, because that's what's going to help you to navigate the waters. Because guess what? Green is green. And if something's making money, it's going to be very hard to not attract people from around the globe, even after you look beyond some of those with limited vision.
Greg, I imagine you were advised by your board and by others to not go internationally, to not look at opportunities because it's just going to take your eye off the ball. But you did it anyway. I mean, any challenges, any hiccups that you might have faced? I mean, obviously it seems to be working out, but is this something that you could or you would advise others like a Quentin, like an Equity to do?
Yeah, I would say, the issues that we had were not understanding the capital extensive the capital necessary in order to launch in new markets. Now, launching online first is always the way to go. That way you can push content via social media from wherever you are. Brick and mortar gets a little bit more difficult, but have partners in those areas. That's what I would say. Yeah, like we're in London, I have a distributor here and a broker who I work with consistently to manage the business here, and same in the UAE. I think when you're looking at international markets, you have to not only look at your partners there, but you have to look at what's going on in that space and spend time in that country to see, because the language is different, the slang is different, the everything's different, things that you don't even know. So you have to spend time in that market before you just jump in. But don't be afraid to. If you say, there's businesses that are from America that are big here in the UK that don't have the sales in America, but are able to now get their feet wet here, generate some revenue, and now take those learnings back to America and be able to do it in an even better way. So, we live in an international world. Right now, we're talking on Zoom and it's nothing. Whereas before, if someone was in London, they're pretty much out of the space until they get back. OOS, out of the office, but that's not how it is now. We're working from all time zones anywhere. So as long as you can do that, they call them digital nomads. Be a nomad entrepreneur. Take your skills, and like LeBron said, I'm taking my skills to Miami. Take your skills to London. Take your skills to Turkey. If you're a designer, one of the good things in Japan, I have a good friend of mine who runs a golf line, and they're out in Japan heavy, pushing their product, and they're actually making sales in Japan because they have a culture for this specific product. So that's where you just have to look at is where is the market, and let me go there.
And I'm glad we're talking about that, right? Because that's something that I've personally been in the process of doing. I've had conversations with investors in the UK. I do see that there's opportunity, but for anybody listening that's, like not in the same chapter of their business, journey as you may be, or that I may be, like, what would be some things that you could share as like step by step, or maybe not even step by step, but some things that you would encourage people to do in order to reach those brokers internationally, in order to understand if there's product market fit in the UK or in
Right.
Singapore or in Japan. How do you reach out, right? Because we've been so Americanized that we
Yeah.
believe that, all of our opportunities are in the first four corners, in our sphere, right? How do we
Hmm.
expand that sphere and start tapping into, other countries and markets that may want what we have, but we don't even know that the opportunity exists.
This is going to be very simple, probably too simple, and people are going to be like, "Man, is that it?" You know where it starts? I watched a movie one time, and it was about The Big Short, actually, and they wanted to figure out what was going on in this market and was that really happening. So what did they do? They bought a plane ticket, coach class, jumped in a flight, went over and saw it for their own two eyes. I think we live in a world now where they're making flights cheap enough where, hey, it may not be the most comfortable seat, but let me go over there and see what's going on. Let me go over there and talk to a friend on social media. We're so connected as a world that you can get on social media and say, hey, friend in Japan, do you think they would like this product? Hire a micro influencer. Do you think they would like this product? Get online in that area and then hire a micro influencer to help you push, see if you get some sales slowly but surely. That's what I say. I posted something on Instagram the other day or today, and it's, a slow but a for show, right? As long as you're getting into the market, you're showcasing your product, you get one, two sales online, and then you're able to kind of pull it up. That's where you start. That's where any major brand start. And the easiest way is to buy a plane ticket. Beyond that, and I know people want to hear a little bit more detail as to business. We have Google, and if you don't have the relationships, because I didn't start out with having the relationships to be able to know about venture capital partners and how did I meet a prince in Saudi Arabia or a prince in Abu Dhabi? Like these came from relationships, friends that I never would have thought that would have these relationships. You say, hey man, I'm looking to do this, and people open up doors. So it's really about your network and just taking a trip, man. I would say in any industry, just going over and just seeing how it operates.
Greg, is it a bit easier, just to stay on this for one more sec, is it a bit easier for you to operate your business internationally because your product is produced internationally? And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it is because since we produce in Vietnam, we're already shipping across the world. So it actually makes it easier for UAE and London because the shipping times are less. So yes, my product is produced overseas, which helps. But majority of products right now are either produced in Thailand, Vietnam, if they're textile, China. We have a ton of import into the United States. Now, American-owned brands, it's a little bit harder because you got to go into another country, which may have different different food health inspecting certificates that you may need, right? If it's food, if it's product based, they may put a tariff on your product. You never know. So it may make it harder depending on what industry you're in. And you're right, having an international product does make it a lot easier to jump into that market. But it still has its challenges because you're still bringing it to another country.
Well, whatever country you're in, everyone knows Moana, right?
Everybody knows Moana. I got stopped on the street the other day from someone who recognized me and was like, "Man, I drink 100 coconuts all the time." That Moana cat. I was like, "What?" I was with my good friend Roger. He was like, "Dang, dude!" It's like I was like, "No, man, that's random, bro. That is so random." But yeah, people know Moana.
Yeah. Quentin, have you seen the Moana, the 100 coconut Moana cans out there? Because it seems like they're everywhere.
It's incredible. It's one of the most amazing partnerships that, I couldn't have imagined, a better alignment. It's just incredible, bro. Like serious major congratulations. I'm a huge Moana fan. I got a little girl. She turned me on to it. I cried on the first Moana. So, like to see this happen, is just major congratulations.
Thank you, man. That was a labor of love, but also we enjoyed working with Disney. We have a 2-year deal with them, so we'll be coming with other opportunities from Disney. But yes, I mean, having Moana on the can, having Maui on the can, and the coconuts, we're in Whole Foods, Walmart, Target, Publix, and they just blow off the shelf because kids are walking by and they're like, "Oh, Moana," And I was walking with my son, and I didn't even tell him it was on the shelf. I just wanted to see if he was going to walk past and notice it because it's right at his eye level. And he turned around and said, Moana, ah, and then he noticed it. So, having an iconic character, especially one that was a part of the biggest movie in the world, really helps, but also because it tied together, right? Because you have Moana, whose family used to be travelers, but now they're coconut farmers, right? So they live off everything on the coconut, which we saw was a direct partnership that kind of meshed in a perfect world. Even with the Kokomora, who are little coconuts running around and doing things and being mischievous, we thought that fit right into the brand language, and we went for it, and it ended up working out very well for us.
Yeah, how do you go about establishing those types of partnerships, right? And what do you see as the impact in these partnerships and highlighting, Black founded brands?
Yeah. Well, first that project took a while for us to pitch Disney, showcase what we were able to do through media. Really bringing that professionalism that we talked about earlier in this conversation because they have systems and processes that they follow. And if you can't fit into those systems and processes, you're not going to be able to make it. And they're not going to give you that opportunity because they know you haven't done it before. And like I had the benefit of working with Pepsi and Def Jam and all these in my tech world. So I hit my head with Pepsi and understood that in order to get it done with Pepsi, it has to be done like this, right? So that those systems have to be put in place. We're partners with Inter Miami as well, the MLS soccer team, and that contract is about this thick, and it took months for it to get done because it had to go to the MLS and come back to the team, and Messi had to review it and all this. So, those types of things all come down to setting up your company with the most professionalism as possible. And you actually, I know people say, oh, professionalism, you think degree and masters, and you don't need that. We have Google this these days, we have Chat GPT, get on and understand what it takes for you to take your business from A to B and scale. And if you know that, it's always, keep the first thing first, right? Sell product. That's what you want to sell coconut water at great margins. And that's what we try to do. But when we are able to take advantage of these partnerships that we have to spend on, but when we're spending, we're actually drawing in eyeballs that are pushing velocity. It's the same as if you're going to spend $50,000 on a social media post, right? Spend that money on a major partnership they can now transcend because Moana, we got the Disney cruises from that, and that's ongoing. So we'll always be producing the Moana product.
I'm curious about whether DEI came up in the conversation. I know you can't talk too much about the contract itself, but certainly there are bigger coconut water players out there. How did 100 Coconuts? Why was your company the company of choice?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll send this to them, and they'll probably be happy to say their names. But Alex and Sandra, there, they were instrumental in helping us. I mean, we were up against a big name player. I'll just say VC. We were up against those guys, and they came and had all this and all that. But we came with creativity. We came with culture. We came with brand partnerships that we had done before, something different, right? Not a Tetra Pak product, but a can that was based off of communicative environments. And from that, we took the creativity of our product and said, hey, now let's put something on the bottle, on the can that's going to resonate with our fans that's beyond what another brand would do. So we went straight on with digital print on the can of the exact character in the movie. We had to spend a little bit more to make sure that print came out perfectly because when you're in print there's 3 colors and there's 5 colors, right? And then there's 8 colors and you're like, oh crap, 8 colors. You never knew that black had about 5 different blacks in it, so you're like, oh man. But it has to be done right, and since we're small and nimble, we can make those changes, whereas a VC, they may have their production already done 5 months and it's 7 months in advance, and they can't make that change as quickly. So when it came down the line, we could be nimble, come up with products that fit the brand cycle and the launch, And then just also be creative about who we're marketing to, and our ingredient list, and shelf sustainability, being self stable, was also a big play, because you don't want a product that's going to live for a couple of months and then be thrown away because the product is spoiling. And because we have a can vessel, our product stays good for 2 years. So that also played a role into us getting that opportunity.
Yeah, I chatted with the founders of a brand, a Better For You gummy brand called Better Sour. And
Mm-hmm.
the founders are both from Hawaii. And I think their background and their knowledge about Hawaii kind of played into Disney's decision. And they didn't say this. I'm just making this assumption because they couldn't talk too much about the deal itself. But I think that may have helped influence the deal. I know you mentioned culture, Greg. I mean, did again, anything related to your business as being a Black-owned business, do you think that had any influence on Disney's decision?
I will say that it never came up. It was never talked about. Who knows what was talked about around the water cooler? But I know for us, it came down to, you can be a Black-owned brand, but that's never going to be the decision making. It's going to be the processes and the professionalism that's brought to the table. And I think because we were able to do that, and because we had culture behind us, and because our product was good, and because it was better for you, those ands kind of stacked up, right? Because the thing is, what our problem is as African American brands, is that when we first come into the door, there might be things that we do not know about. So as the boxes start to get checked off, we're going to miss a couple checks in the beginning, which is no fault to us, but we just didn't have that knowledge base to be able to have those processes set up, because we just didn't have the capital. So Disney may want to do a partnership with you, but they start checking down the line and they say, oh, this check is here. Okay, this check up. They don't have this. The distribution's not there. They don't have the world. But we love your product. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But guess what? You don't have the distribution in order for us to have this product to the masses across the country. So we can't partner with you. So I think it came down to, yes, being a Black owned brand probably did help. But I think it all came down to, if you can execute, and if your processes are set up the right way. I think that's what came down to with Disney.
No, I appreciate that perspective, because I do think that there is an automatic perception or assumption, right, that because you're a Black founder and, Moana's, about people of color, like, oh, it would be a natural thing to bring another person of color into the equation. But it's like, I think that removes the reality of how hard you've worked, and the 10,000 plus hours that you've put in order to be prepared for something like this, right? When you
And
bring
that's
up,
the argument. I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. I just want to say that's the argument that is the problem, because people are looking at DEI as if it's just we're giving you no, you're not giving anyone an opportunity. It's the look, even that has nobody's giving anyone free opportunities if they can't execute on the product, so, or on the opportunity. So you're hitting it right on the head. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, that's incredible, because I think there is a misperception of what DEI is and what it means, right? There's when we look at DEI, it's not just Black people. When people hear DEI, they think Black, and like that's where it stops. So it's like, oh, you're gonna remove all Black stuff. It's like, no, it's not. DEI is not, like AKA Black stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's only actually 4% Black. I mean, some of these things that have been coming out, it's been more women,
Yeah.
of all colors, that have been getting the opportunities from DEI. It's just ridiculous that we have to even be talking about getting rid of something like this. That is just, it's just something that is an equalizer.
Yeah, it's asinine for sure. But I think, what I want to really bring attention to is the fact that you've had to put in the 10,000 hours in order to be qualified and prepared to do and execute on the partnership. And I think what's beautiful about it, and I'm curious of your perspective on this, for me, it opens up this door of possibility as a Black founder to see what's possible with these types of partnerships. Have you, since that happened, like, have you had any other founders or any other business owners or individuals who are looking to get into, CPG or build these kind of partnerships, like kind of come to you for advice or as that example of what's possible? Because quite frankly, we see a lot of successful brands with founders that happen to be Black that don't get the Disney opportunities and could be prepared for it, could be, well versed, but don't even see themselves represented in that space enough to think that it's possible. Like, you've really opened that door to show, we're not just putting Michael Jackson in a Pepsi commercial, right? Like, there's, like there's actually a partnership component that's a part of it. So I'm curious, like, have you seen that shift in this short period of time, or are you hoping to see more activations around, Black founders, brands, and these partnerships of this magnitude?
I wish I could say yes, but what I could say is this. And most people try to separate church and state, but there's a God for a reason. And, that was prayed for and that was blessed upon. I think that we don't see a ton of new Black brands getting these opportunities. We're not just going to switch on the light automatically, right? So I do getting conversations or get calls from people that say, well, Greg, how did you get that done? Well, Greg, how did you do this? I'm like, well, we went, we pitched, we got the opportunity, right place, right time. Also, I would say, and this is something that could kind of be served as controversial, but at the time, a lot of the people who were representing the brand didn't necessarily at that representing the brand in that conversation weren't African American people. So sometimes I see that as that happens, right? Where you can have a broker or a company, and whoever is representing that brand is how that brand is looked at, right? So it's with everything. When you're walking into the door of a VC, if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you walk in with a hoodie and a robe, you went to Harvard, there's a different perception than if Greg Lowe walks in there with a hoodie. They're like, that guy's not ready. He walked in here with a hoodie. I have to have a suit on. I have to be presentable. There's different perceptions. So what I would say is that the perception of the brand coming in, the processes are what got you there. And they're not just giving these opportunities at a whim. We were blessed and lucky to be able to get Enter Miami, blessed and lucky to be able to get Disney. And what I would say is that going forward, it's always going to be, those first few pushes, right, of brands getting opportunities. Now we've seen, Fear of God with Jerry Lorenzo, which is a clothing line, get opportunities with Adidas. But now, are we seeing the floodgates open with Adidas with other brands? Not necessarily, but what we do see is, they start to trickle in more and more. And then over the next 10 years, you may have three. Whereas we still have so much more to do in this space. It's 2025, and being Black in business is a lot better than it was in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, as far as the access to opportunities and the knowledge base that we have from, say, YouTube, TikTok, some of the podcasts that are going on, like, for instance, Earn Your Leisure. They got huge off of teaching financial literacy to the African American crowd in a way that they could understand. And I think as we continue to do that, that's when we start seeing more doors opening, because the professionalism goes along with it. Because you're not going to know how to sell a stock unless you know exactly what the stock is worth and what the ticker means. And if you don't know what the ticker means, you don't even know that that's the stock that's going. So it starts with the very minute learnings.
This has been an incredible conversation. I have learned so much, and I feel like my perspective has changed, even for someone who's been in this industry for a long time. I feel like it was authentic, transparent, educational, and I thank you both so much for taking the time. I know it's going to be a great listen for our audience as well, so really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray, and you too, Quentin. I appreciate you guys doing this. Not a lot of people are hitting these topics on the head, and we need to continue to do that. BevNet, you guys taking the time out to feature brands like mine and Quentin's with Equitea, and being able to, showcase what we're building has been amazing. So thank you, BevNet. Thank you, Taste Radio, for Ray and your team for really giving us a platform to stand on and even have these conversations. So I really appreciate it.
Incredible dialogue and resources and opportunities for others who may not know that, certain things exist. So truly grateful for both of you and just honored to keep this conversation going.
Absolutely.